Okay. So, you might want to like have a seat. Like now that we're gonna like talk about like the D&D thing. Yeah, this is gonna take like a few minutes.
Sweating.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, even the thing is like this isn't even actual tournament, right?
I was gonna say,
we're judges, and this is the lowest stakes scenario,
right?
And it's still really
it's
stressful.
good though. Yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's good
it is
to know
good.
this too.
And it's also good to have like a baseline idea. Okay, so. We're not going to talk about like the mistrigger stuff.
Right.
Like we already know what the infraction penalty and fix is. Given that I like innocently actually like forgot. We're going to be talking about what is the like steps that you would take to try to investigate whether this was an intentional missing this trigger or a not intentional missing this trigger. Right? Because if it was intentionally missing the trigger, then I think we can pretty much like what we said before, that's cheating, right? I did something that was against the rules. It's not allowed for me to miss exiling all graveyards. I did it to gain an advantage, and I, the other thing, I knew it was against it. I'm pretty sure most people would know that it's, against the rules to not do a triggered ability that you're supposed to.
Right.
So.
Yeah, there are scenarios that can come up where the player might legitimately not know they were breaking a rule.
Exactly.
But they are very few and far between. And especially when it comes to like very straightforward things like an enters the battlefield trigger. You know, if we get into the weeds, maybe there's something where they're like, no, I legitimately didn't know that's how the interaction was.
Right, when it gets like real.
Yeah, but like very simple things like this, a player trying to sell you on like, I didn't know I could not do that thing, is your default should be like, they know. If you know how to play Magic, you know you're supposed to do what the card says.
Right.
Okay, so with that being the case, what we need to do is we need to establish whether, when I played this card, I legitimately forgot to say, exile all graveyards, or whether I thought, hey, it'd be cool if I got to have my graveyard, but like still have the rest in peace in play. So, what can we do to establish that fact one way or the other? And we kind of already talked about that a little bit.
That's what I was thinking. I think the biggest thing here too is just doing the background research, right? So.
Okay, so format familiarity is like legitimately huge.
Yeah.
So knowing like that Rest in Peace is a tier 1 sideboard card against this specific deck, knowing that my game plan involves getting this specific artifact that 25% of my copies of are in my graveyard into play and jamming with the creature. Those are both like important things to know that you. Now, if you don't know that stuff, you can ask the players, right? You can ask the players like, okay, what's your? You can like just not in front of the opponent.
You get the bull.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
That's why away from the table I said like,
yeah.
He's got the ruins. The hammer's in his yard. It's really good for him to not exile. Like, especially because sometimes you'll get into the cheating brain investigation by like a routine call.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, it's going to be because the opponent is like, something is weird.
Yeah.
Like, you're very frequently going to get a vibe from the opponent that something is off.
Now that's a very important point because there's a couple of things. No, intuition I think is like actually a bad thing to rely on. There's a couple of things that I use as specific triggers to decide whether I think that it's warranted to investigate further. And so one of them is, would this infraction be, beneficial to the person who committed it? Right? So like if you think about like missing Esper Sentinel trigger, or like, forgetting to gain life off of your lifelink creature. You're not cheating doing that, right? Like you're not intentionally missing stuff like that.
It's good for you.
Yeah. But like, at the same time, a lot of mistakes are like legitimately good for you. Like maybe if I like had 2 cards stick together when I was scrying and I got to look at an extra card, that would be good for me. But it wouldn't be like as game breakingly like good or bad. So you want to like put like a scale of like how good is it that this player committed this infraction for that. So it's like, and it goes all the way from like it's really bad for me to commit this infraction for me, it really hurts my chances of winning, to like it really helps my chances of winning. And like the higher up we are on this scale, the higher your alert should be.
And
so
assuming that it doesn't get caught.
Yeah.
I've definitely in the past fallen into the trap of like, well, this is really good for them, but in every world where we catch it, the fix makes it so they can't get it. Don't think like that. You gotta think like, if the player hadn't caught it, hadn't called the judge, what would have been the benefit?
That's why I also asked to look in the hand, because I felt like
Yeah.
that would be pretty detrimental depending on like.
Like, for example, if I had a second copy of Hammer,
right? Then I'd be like,
Then it
all right,
might not
wouldn't have
matter.
happened
but I mean, like,
anyway.
I do have a second
You
copy
do,
of Hammer.
Sure.
yeah, sort of.
So,
But that costs what, 3 mana? So would you? Be
well, I mean, it costs the exact same as getting it back with this.
True.
It actually costs less. Okay, so that's the first criteria. The second criteria is how hard would it be for someone to get away with this? Because like again, there's a scale for like it'd be really easy to get away with it, or it'd be like almost impossible to get away with it. So
I feel like since this is symmetrical, it's kind of one of those things that would probably go under the radar more than over.
well, let's think about this. If I play this and my intention is that I'm gonna like intentionally leave this stuff in the graveyard, and Jeff says, "Hey, I'm, rest in peace triggers, we exile."
Right.
Right? Like then the jig's up. I like my cheat didn't even work.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
It's also going along with that. In this particular case, and this one is because it's symmetrical. Like I might want to, imagine this was later in the game. I have a lot more cards in the graveyard.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying.
I might want to keep mine.
Exactly.
And so part of the gamble there is because I know I'm allowed, you're allowed to let your opponent miss triggers.
Yeah.
If he knows that, he can say, well, I think in this spot it's better for me to have a graveyard, so I'm going to miss it. He's probably not going to call me on it because he wants to have a graveyard.
That's what I was going to say, because like, I was actually going to leverage this against like your deck. Not so much yours. Like, yeah, if they call it on you and your stuff gets exiled, okay, yeah, the jig is up, you're right. But since you're playing a deck that is known to reanimate and requires a lot of the graveyard, I think the ball's actually more in your court when you miss the trigger, because when you play it, you know that obviously this is early on, but like say like a good point, like let's say you had like 10 more cards in graveyard, you'd probably be like, hey, I don't want to lose my cards. So then I'd be like, yeah, no, I don't want that trigger on the stack, so I need these later. And they're like, oh, sweet. It's kind of a gambit, and I think that's probably what I was thinking in some of that too. Like it's like, you're playing it with the idea of knowing that you probably wouldn't want the trigger to go on the stack. But an idea, of course. I don't know. I can't predict the future.
Right. So okay. We've already talked about like what kind of criteria would lead you to believe that an investigation is warranted. And I believe that like based on those criteria, I think this situation definitely at least requires a closer look from the judge. A lot of the time when it's missed trigger, it's like, oh, okay, he missed the trigger, warning, not warning, put it on the stack, don't put it on the stack, whatever. And then you just walk away. But with the facts of this case, as you had access to them, I think that we really should investigate. So I'm going to briefly review what those facts were. We know that I have in play an Academy Ruins, which means that I have if this Rest in Peace trigger resolves, then the Academy Ruins goes from getting my card that the deck is named after back to doing stone cold nothing. All right. So that's fact number one. Fact number two is the cards in his graveyard is completely worthless. So this was a straight up free roll for me to like try this cheat out.
Yeah.
So if I play it and then I don't say anything and then he doesn't say anything, then I got away with it. But if I play it and he does say something, oh well. So it was totally free for me to. It's not like I'm giving anything up, gameplay wise to try out missing this trigger, because I don't care if any of these cards is in his graveyard.
Right.
Most likely. Okay, so there's that. That's the facts that I would say. Okay, now that we've established that, it's time to take a step at what should I be asking to try to get more information. So we already identified what information you need. What is that?
The information is you should probably, when you're talking to me, to figure out the 4 requisites that we were given to, is to say if they broke or violate a rule.
Yeah, which we know I did.
Which you did, and that kind of went hand in hand with the other one as well, which was
gaining an advantage.
Yeah, gaining the advantage.
So we know I did that too.
And then if they were knowingly breaking.
Right. So what we need to do in the investigation is to establish did I know that I had to exile with rest in peace?
And that's where we kind of did the background research with the player, a little insight from you, and then obviously going around talking to other players where they also agree that you never missed the
previous
trigger.
games are good, previous opponents are good.
Yeah.
If the player is like
And even the previous game, it was good too, even like as recent as that
right,
one.
a lot of times you're also going to have sort of contextual knowledge. Like if you're judging locally, you'll know your local player base,
Right.
and if someone is shady on occasion, you're
They'll
going to
get that
start to
reputation.
catch whiffs of that, right? Similarly, at large events, when you go talk to the scorekeeper, Dave said, yes, I've had a couple penalties. You're going to say, okay, I'll be back in a second. I'm going to go check something. You go check that with the scorekeeper because you want to see what they were for. And there have definitely been times where I have checked with the head judge or a scorekeeper, and they have been like, what's the player's name or whatever. Or the scorekeeper pulls the penalties and they're like, oh, that player. And gosh, they've played a lot of these big events, and they always seem to have just short of enough penalties to get a game loss in every event. Yeah, you can get info from kind of anyone involved in the process.
So, now that we've got that goal in mind, we want to talk. And I like the questions that you asked about me and my familiarity with the deck. I think another thing that you might have touched on is this kind of interesting fact, which is that this card is Chinese and none of the rest of my cards are Chinese. So
Add confusion, I guess.
well, maybe
Quote,
not.
unquote,
Maybe I'm borrowing it from my friend who's Chinese.
Maybe you like it as well.
Yeah, maybe that was the only one that they had, and the cheapest one they had on TCG Player was foreign at the time.
Right.
So, but it would have been a good idea that's one thing that maybe stood out that maybe you could have asked. Is like, why are you playing this one Chinese? And maybe the answer to that question would have been, I bought it on eBay and that was the cheapest one. And maybe, which incidentally is true, that's why these ones are Chinese.
The last thing on DQ, when you pull the trigger, you need to honestly go in the other room, go away from all the players, psych yourself up for 30 seconds. Do not come to the table with, I'm afraid, or I think, or when you come to the table, it's, you have cheated, you will be DQ'd from the event, here's the paperwork, you go. They're already going to be upset, don't leave them wiggle room to claw in on you.
That was my fault too. I should have came. When I came back, it took me a second to get back to composure.
Right. Okay, so we talked about that, and there's so the bottom line is there's all kinds of reasons why it might have been Chinese, but that's something that is different that you could have asked about that maybe could have gave you some more information. Maybe I'm borrowing this card from a friend, and this is the first tournament that I've played Rest in Peace at.
Okay.
Maybe it's my favorite card, and my girlfriend who's Chinese gave it to me, and so I speak Chinese even, and
It's
my
special place.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of things, but there certainly is a chance that we could have got some more information out of that line of questioning. Same thing with Academy Runes. This one was a little trickier because if you don't know about Modern, this is not a standard card to play in this deck.
Pretty.
The normal versions of this deck have never played this card, as far as I'm aware, and so that could have been another point that you might have asked, because without this card, the situation gets a lot less suspicious, right? With this card, and especially with the card in play, it gets a lot more interesting. So that's another thing that Academy Ruins. You could have asked about that, and again, could be totally reasonable, or could be you hear some information that makes you think that is a little bit weird.
Right.
Okay, so we kind of talked during the investigation about what we thought about those lines of questioning. The questioning about my familiarity level with the deck, that was good. Obviously, the information you got out of that was probably more suspicious, right? I'm like a diehard one trick on
That's
this
what I
deck.
was thinking, yeah.
I never really played any other decks in Modern. This is my favorite one, it always will be. So okay, now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the investigation talk, which is okay, based on all of the facts that you saw, how percent-wise confident are you that the DQ was correct?
Truth be told, if I was actually breaking it down percentage to percentage, I felt like Probably like 85-15. So 85% chance that I think the infraction was, I could see how it could be an honest mistake, but I also see that like when you compare the potential one honest mistake against like you're playing Chris the other games, even the game before you played it and remembered the trigger, all the opponents we talked to said you remembered the trigger, like that's when I start thinking like, okay, and then I think about you yourself even said this is a 10 out of 10 counter for this card, for this deck, so even if this resolved or didn't resolve, you're still probably going to hurt this deck, almost crippling it with this card unless they draw an answer, because they can't do their reanimator stuff they want to do with Yogg Ball and all that stuff.
Right.
Until that card's gone, etc. So I felt like it seemed like like one of those situations where you want your cake and you want to eat it too, kind of thing. All
right.
That's my viewpoint.
Okay. So I would say, based on like if I were the judge for this call and I had all the information that you had, I would have probably not pulled the trigger on DQing with the information that you had access to.
I mean, I'm a mean judge.
I mean, like the one thing that you have to like come to grips with is that you will not ever have a 100% certainty on like a DQ. Well, probably not.
Especially
unless you like catch them doing something extremely shady, like in the act or something. Like you're probably not going to be 100% sure. So you're gonna have to like put that one in your soul and carry that one. So, adding on to what I said, based on the information that I showed, if I only was able to see the information that you saw, I probably wouldn't have pulled the trigger. But, well, yeah, it would have been a nothing, right? Because like it's like not a detrimental. So, but there was a couple of other pieces of evidence that we had talked about, right? Talking to the scorekeeper and especially talking to other judges. Now, it just so happens that during this tournament, there were a couple of really interesting judge calls involving Rest in Peace coming out of my deck, and it wasn't just the one where I like forgot to what zone it goes to if you destroy it. So
the dies one as well, dies to or exile replacement.
Yeah, so like there was one. There was a couple of, and in the video I'll show like some clips about it. Now wait, with Rest in Peace it's not a may. Rest in Peace it's not optional whether to exile. It doesn't say you may exile or do that.
Yeah.
But the important fact is it's great to talk to your like fellow judges and colleagues, because if you saw this situation happen and it was perfectly legit, but then you talk to another judge who's like, oh, are you talking about that the one guy like describes me, he's like we're playing Hammer Time, oh yeah, I had a call with him like last round where he like played the Rest in Peace and then like tried to argue that he should get the trigger even though he missed it because it's not
like
a may,
opposite, right? Yeah,
so if you get some situations like that coming in, that's where you would if I had access to all the evidence that you had and that judge call, then I'm pulling the trigger faster than you.
This person's out of here before they even.
Yeah, so that you're probably not going to get like a star, piece of evidence like that, but you probably will get like, some like good conversations out of it if you talk to the judge. Now,
so my question, I guess, for you as well is like,
yeah.
would this be? And I know probably I'm assuming the answer might be like there is no right or wrong call here, but would that be the right or wrong call?
Well, I mean, like I said, I told you what I believe. Like if I saw all the evidence that you saw, I would have not.
You wouldn't have done it. Okay.
But again, like you said, there isn't a right or wrong answer because, like, maybe I interpret that evidence to mean that there's like 70% chance that he did it and 30% that he's innocent. And maybe my personal threshold is that I have to be 80% sure.
Right.
Whereas maybe someone else interprets that same evidence as saying there's, a 60% chance that he did it and a 40% chance that he's innocent, but my threshold is 50% or more, so I'm going to pull the trigger on it.
Exactly.
So there isn't really like a set in stone kind of model. It's more based on like, you're kind of it's among the most art rather than science-based things in the judgment.
Yeah, sometimes science is okay.
So yeah.
Right.
All right.
Fantastic.
So yeah, any other questions or comments about this?
No, I just want to appreciate you letting me learn about this and ask so many questions. I know I can ask a lot of questions.
Sure thing.
So I'm thankful for that. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, have a great rest of your day.
I will.